Fanalysis combines the data made popular in fantasy football with the latest sports betting trends to find you the sharpest angles. And for that, we bring in the lead betting analyst from Pickswise, Jared Smith. Jared, welcome back. And another interesting week here to talk about. And I want to start things off here with the Raiders are 1-point favorites against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Raiders are coming off a shutout loss in London, but both of these teams are absolutely struggling. But for some reason, you have them as your best bet this week. What analytics prove that point to you?
Oh, yes, Steve, all the games on the board this week, all the great teams, Bills, Chiefs, you get that Rams-Bucks game, which we can get to that in a little bit too. But this Raiders-Jags game really stood out to me. Maybe some would argue it's the worst game on the board this week. And, these teams really struggle winning close games. I think the number is 0-10 in one-score games this year. But when you look at this Raiders team, I think there's reason for upside. First of all, I will discuss one trend that I think has some weight here. And, trends, the context of them sometimes can be a little flimsy. But in this particular case, teams coming off of a shutout, 25-10-3 against the spread. And that's a 70% trend. That's a pretty significant trend. And the reason why I think it carries a little more weight than your average trend is just the motivational aspect attached to it and the fact that these are professional athletes. I know sometimes they don't always look it, but they are professional athletes. And usually the week after getting embarrassed, they tend to bounce back. And of course, the numbers say positive regression tends to be a thing, especially over the long haul of the season. And this Raiders team, it was a historically bad performance for them on Sunday in New Orleans. They didn't cross midfield until the second half. I think it was early fourth quarter. So I expect them to play a lot better this week against the Jaguars defense, 24th in schedule adjusted efficiency. The Saints were a top 10 team in that category. So just right there, I think you're going to see a step down in class for this Raiders offense. On the other side of the ball for the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence is a curious case. We have not seen that step forward from him this year, at least analytically. In fact, overall, he's basically a bottom 5 quarterback in the EPA, expected points added, plus CPOE, completion percentage over expectation grade. And then when you really dive into that game in London against the Broncos on Sunday morning, things were great on the script. 70% success rate in the first quarter. Then the script wore off, and he threw that terrible interception at the goal line right at the beginning of the second quarter. Second quarter on, Jaguars offense, 36% success rate. So when the adversity hits, Steve, we have not seen Trevor Lawrence overcome it. Meanwhile, I think we're going to get some travel issues, perhaps. Of course, coming back from London, we'll see what the fatigue factor is. And, oh, by the way, the Raiders can't play any worse than they did last week.
Oh, man, there's no doubt. They can't get the running game going. They got Jacobs and Devontae Adams. What did Devontae Adams have? 1 catch for 3 yards in this past game? Here's the one thing that kind of concerns me a little bit. Jacksonville's defense is really good. They're only allowing 19.8 points per game. Are you worried that the Raiders could struggle putting points on the board?
Yeah, and I think that obviously is the concern. They're on the road. It's an early game, West Coast, second straight. West Coast to East Coast. I know they were in New Orleans. It was technically Central Time Zone, but still from Vegas.
See, these are intangibles, though, that you can't really put a number on.
Exactly. Very hard to quantify the travel. And I would say the travel situation for Jacksonville is a little more difficult coming back from London. That definitely screams a little more fatigue to me. And I certainly agree that the Jaguars defense on papers had some moments. But again, when you adjust for schedule, that's where we see the drop-off. And I think Jacksonville's full body of work, maybe not as good as we expect. And again, if the offense is in a negative game script, we saw what happened when they were in a negative game script against the Broncos. Things were going great on the script early in the game, but then when things started to go south, Jacksonville just doesn't have those veteran players in key spots that can say, okay, guys, we've been here before. Let's stop the bleeding and let's start playing better. You could see just the confidence just melt away from Trevor Lawrence and the rest of this Jacksonville offense when things get tight. We saw it in that game against the Giants. I think they outplayed the Giants in that game, but they still lost because late in the game, they just didn't have that one guy that could make that play to get over the hump. And I think Vegas does have a few of those guys, especially Carr, Adams, and Jacobs on offense. So I favor the Raiders to bounce back in this game, anything under a field goal.
That's why we look at those key analytics like weighted DVOA and yards per play, because those come into play. The Jets, 11.5-point home dogs to the Bills. But that's not the number you're targeting this week. You're looking at the over-under of 46. What interests you here?
Yeah, so, you see the big number here, and it's unique because both teams are above 500. And that immediately points me in the direction of the favorite. But then I saw some really respected money come in this week on the Jets. So as much as I think the Bills win this game and they probably cover, I don't want to, go toe-to-toe with the market right now, because I could actually see this line maybe dipping a little bit closer, maybe to that key number of 10 at some point this weekend. But the total does interest me, and here's why. First of all, I think Buffalo's offense, as good as Josh Allen is, I think the explosion is a little bit muted this year. And I think that's because they just don't have as many weapons stretching the field. We've seen them play a couple of games in some tough conditions. And now you get this fascinating matchup, Sauce Gardner on Stephon Diggs. How does that play out? I think if there's one guy in the league that can maybe keep Stephon Diggs in check, Sauce Gardner right now, of all cornerbacks with at least 200 snaps, he is grading out as the #1 cover corner in the league. Guys, he is just a rookie, and he's only played in 8 games. Very high ceiling.
How he didn't win Rookie of the Month was ridiculous, but nonetheless.
Yeah, that certainly is concerning. I think he's going to be the Rookie of the Year, though, on the defensive side. But on the other side of the ball, Zach Wilson just really struggles in pressure situations. He's actually grading out as the worst quarterback under pressure this season. Now, there is a little bit of a concern that those pressure situations can lead to some volatility on the scoreboard, i.e. pick 6, fumble 6, terrible mistake in your own red zone. We've seen Zach make a few of those, which sets the Bills up on a short field, and then it's good luck trying to defend Josh Allen. But if Zach can avoid that big turnover that causes easy points, I mean, listen, I just don't see the Jets offense getting a ton of movement here. Their offensive line, of course, without Elijah Vera-Tucker last week, didn't play well. If the Patriots tackled Denzel Mims on that crazy play where he bounced off defenders like bumper pool, I think you see the Jets don't get that last touchdown, and it's a 22-10 final score, and the Jets all of a sudden really struggle for another week in a row offensively. So I don't see the Jets getting a ton of movement in this game. And then the trend really backs all this up. Divisional unders this year, 28-12. So teams that know each other very well, they play each other, those games have skewed under at nearly a 75% rate. So I really like the under in this spot. Now that it's gotten beneath that key total of 47, again, the key totals in the NFL on the total side, 51, 47, 44. So we're kind of in the middle between that 44 and 47 right now. But I think I feel comfortable putting at least one unit on that under 46.
What's crazy is that the Jets defense, their opponents actually have the best starting field position in the entire NFL. Other stats, the Bills are #1 in points allowed defensively. They're #1 in pressure. Pass rush win rate. The Jets only ran for 51 yards last week. We don't see a lot of opportunities for the Jets to put points on the board. And on top of that, maybe the most important key to what we're seeing around the NFL this year is the under is hitting on a 58% clip throughout the entire NFL. Is this a case where the public loves to play the overs because the public wants scores and the value of, I guess, the market is reacting to how the public likes to bet the overs?
Yeah. And again, the bookmakers I talk to on a weekly basis, at some point, we will see points. And maybe it's later in the year when the market moves so low that we start seeing some games go over by, slimmer margins that maybe would have been higher totals earlier in the season if we didn't see this rush of unders cash. So I think big picture to me, I don't like to look at those overarching trends at the top. Usually the way I handicap the game, match up first and then do the trends back up what the data that I'm seeing with the matchups. And I think with this Jets-Bills game, absolutely. Again, the one fly in the ointment here is that, wild card, Zach Wilson, gunslinger, throwing some balls where he shouldn't be throwing them. And then that leads to very quick, easy points for Buffalo. But again, if Zach can avoid those debilitating turnovers that have really been, an issue throughout his entire career. So it certainly could happen this week against a good Bills defense. This Buffalo defense,
Jared, I just thought
mentioned it.
You look like you were about to go into the Steve Martin wild and crazy guy kind of antics right there. I wasn't sure how wild and crazy Zach Wilson gets to. Real quick, I want to get to the Bucs here before we take off. The Bucs are 2.5-point home favorites against the Rams. The over/under in this one, 43.5. But both offenses have problems right now. This has got to be a get-right game for somebody, right?
I think it's funny. I posed this exact question in that way to one of the bookmakers this week, and I said, in my eyes, the Rams are fully toasted, like burnt, and the Bucs are like partly toasted. You know, when you ask for your bagel toasted at the bodega, you only want it a little bit toasted. You know, you don't want to go full on burnt, crisp. The Rams are just
don't run it through the machine
burnt.
Twice, right?
Yeah, the Rams are burnt to a crisp right now, and it's really the offensive line. So here's what I'll kind of throw out this game script for you, and then we'll get into the offensive line a little bit. So the Rams had 2 weeks to prepare for the 49ers. They had their bye. The Niners got beat up by the Chiefs, coming in with a bit of a banged-up defense. The first quarter, again, the game script for Sean McVay was very positive. The Rams were 9th in EPA per play in the first quarter last week amongst all NFL teams, 50% success rate. But then the script wore off and things went south in a hurry. Bottom 5 in EPA per play, 34% success rate from the second quarter on for this Rams team. And again, when things are off that, nice, neat and tidy Sean McVay script, it just doesn't go well because this Rams offensive line, the second lowest grade of any O-line this season, they're giving up the second most pressures. On the running side, just 3.3 yards per carry. That's the second worst in the league. And less than 1 yard before first contact, the third lowest rate in the league. So again, bottom 5 in basically every analytical metric we use to grade offenses and offensive line. And that means Matthew Stafford doesn't have enough time to throw. The running game obviously has not helped at all. And then, oh, by the way, Cooper Kupp, bit of a gimpy ankle this week. We'll see how that shapes out on Sunday. I think the Bucs under a field goal is a very good bet here. They're getting healthier defensively. Murphy Bunting and Carlton Davis should be back. No Cameron Brate, no Antoine Winfield. That certainly matters. But Tom Brady off the mini bye, 10 days off. And hopefully some of those personal issues are behind him. Of course, the big news last week, the divorce. It's been a week of that now. You would hope Tampa, with this division being very poor in the NFC South, sees the light at the end of the tunnel, knows they can still catch the Falcons, who they have a game in hand. They beat them head-to-head a few weeks ago. I think Tampa Bay is the team that gets right.
See, and it's great because you can see a way that the Bucs win this game without Tom Brady having to be the dominating Tom Brady. Yeah. And that path is the pass rush. The Bucs average 3.5 sacks per game this year. The Rams are given up 24, which is the 4th most sacks in the entire NFL. The pressure that Tampa is going to put on the Rams in this one is just going to be insurmountable. So we will just have to see how that plays out as this week goes on. All right, we're going to take a deeper dive into how to bend the books in your favor. That's in our other segment. For Jared Smith of Pickswise, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.